Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Mian Shafiq. I'm working as an assistant professor in Chemical and Petroleum Engineering Department at UCSI University, Malaysia. So I'm going to present today about my research, which is based on uh, CO2 storage, and the topic of my research is surrogate-assisted evolutionary optimization of CO2 ESGR and storage. What is CO2 storage? CO2 storage is basically a very important phenomena nowadays, or very important process nowadays, because we have to store the CO2 which is released into the atmosphere by different means, especially by the industries or by the vehicles. And petroleum industry is blamed to be responsible for this because most of the CO2 is released into the atmosphere by the petroleum products. That's why petroleum industry is focusing nowadays on this CO2 storage. And then ESGR. ESGR is basically enhanced shale gas recovery. Enhanced shale gas recovery means that there is a reservoir which is shale reservoir, and we have to produce that shale. So to produce that shale, we need to apply different means. One of the means is to inject the gas into the reservoir. By injecting the gas into the reservoir, we can increase the pressure, which ultimately produce the shale from the reservoir. So that's why in this research, what we are doing, we are going to inject CO2 into the reservoir. The CO2 will push the gas, which is usually methane, shale gas. So the CO2 will push the gas will be produced, and also we are seeing the storage of the CO2 into that reservoir. So basically, we are obtaining two objectives by doing this research. And it also has a concept of artificial neural network in petroleum industry. So my presentation or my speech consists of four major parts: introduction, then models and methods which are commonly used to predict this ESGR and CO2 storage, then results and discussion, and finally I will go towards the conclusion of my research. Introduction. To enhance CO2 enhanced shale gas recovery, CO2 ESGR is basically an efficient method, and it is also synchronized with carbon dioxide, and it is more safer and more reliable than the conventional reservoir methods due to absorption, because in shale reservoirs 20 to 85% of the gas exists in the absorbed state. And this study also developed an optimization scheme for the CO2 ESGR by integrating stochastic algorithms with an artificial neural network. And Young et al. Proposed a modified Langmuir-Frulich-Dubinin-Raduskevich absorption model to characterize the absorption of CO2 and CH4 in the shale. This is very important because initially we have to make a shale gas reservoir sector model, and then in that sector model we have to fracture it hydraulically, because we need to fracture the shale reservoir first. So we have to fracture it hydraulically. So once we fracture it hydraulically, then we have to do the sensitivity analysis on different parameters. For example, the sensitivity analysis will be done on gas injection rate, bottom hole pressure, fracture spacing, half length, and conductivity, which are predictors for training the surrogate model. And then we are going to do the later hypercube modeling, which is known as LHS, and we are going to use 206 different parameters to prepare that model. And then finally, CH4 recovery and CO2 storage will be obtained by using the simulation. So this is the main concept. So CO2 ESGR is also very promising carbon capture, utilization, and storage technology, which can concurrently store CO2 in shale gas formation and in the shale gas production, and also it is stored. So CO2 injection is basically in a hydraulically fractured shale gas can increase the methane production by 26 to up to 60% during continuous injection, while more could be produced during huff and puff stage. So if we inject CO2 continuously, so our production of shale gas can be increased by 26%, which is very up to 60%, which is very good amount. And this is by the continuous injection. But if we do huff and puff means we inject, then we stop for some time, then again we inject, then stop for some time like this. So it's huff and puff method, so it can be increased about. So iPhones use a co-flooding system. So basically iPhones is the one person who use the co-flooding system to measure the dynamic gas absorption changes in the shale and identify the significant competitive absorption effect. So basically iPhone measure the absorption of the CO2 on the shale. Specifically, the primary recovery of methane gas was increased by 26.69% and N2 injection increased the CH4 recovery by 16.8%, whereas CO2 injection can improve the recovery by 21.4%, and at the same time 66% of CO2 can be stored or sequestered. So this is very important. You can see that 66% of CO2 will be stored and we are producing around 21.4% of methane. So shale gas reservoir properties and sector model. So Sichuan Basin, basically this is the basin in China. So we use that data of that basin to make our model. Is the largest shale gas player out of North America that is commercially producing shale gas. It's a basin in North America. According to Chinese National Energy Administration, shale gas produced from the Sichuan Basin amounted up to 24 billion meter cube in 2022. That's a huge amount. So the shale gas demonstration areas including Changjiang, Vijuan, Zaotong, and Fuling have been successfully developed, achieving industrial scale production of the shale gas from depth 2,500 to 3,500 meters. So basically the depth of the reservoir. So in the Changjiang area, 3 horizontal wells were completed with an average vertical depth of 2,477 meters with 8 to 12 stages of fracturing. In Geoshiba, the depth of most horizontal wells range from 2,313 to 2,595 with a base thickness of approximately 83 to 101 meter. And we are producing a maximum of 3.83 meter cube per ton of gas. So these are the properties which are used for the gas. For example, the porosity range, there are different fields like the Shiba shale gas field, Changjiang shale gas field, Vijuan shale gas field, and they have different properties like porosity, fracture porosity, matrix porosity, permeability, depth, temperature, the gas content, reservoir pressure, lasting modulus, and rock density. So these are different models. These are different parameters which are used, and we have to get the average value. For example, for positive matrix positive, we use 0.03. For fracture positive, we use 0.009, and for fracture permeability, we use 0.6. So these are the data which we have used. So initially, we make a model. So this is a simple model, a basic shale gas as a model consisting of 61, 61, and one grid was established, and each grid was 21 meter by 120 meter. That's the model we prepared. The top of the gas reservoir, the top of this model basically is at 200,600 meter. The formation temperature is 70 degrees centigrade and the pressure is 30 megapixel. And using this model, we are going to do the simulation. The next stage is the latent hypercube sampling. As I mentioned earlier, latent hypercube sampling (LHS) is a stratified sampling approach excels in near random sampling of multi-dimensional parameter database space, which is favorable for collecting high quality data samples to better train the neural network models. So the reservoir parameters and engineering factors that must be looked into during the actual development of the shale gas reservoir are multidimensional and unevenly distributed. The latent hypercube sampling afterwards determines the number of sample points and then divides the range of each variable in the multi-dimensional space into the same number of equal intervals. That's latent hypercube sampling. Then you come towards the ANN model. So ANN model is a machine learning model. It's artificial neural network that processes information by mimicking the nerve system of the human brains, which is composed of neurons and that send signals and outputs through weighted connections. Two hidden layers with varying neurons have been set up to find the appropriate ANN model structure with a relatively high performance. The big database used herein was created through the numerical simulation of the sample points, created using latent hypercube sampling and ANN with CO2 storage capacity, and shale gas recovery as objective functions were then constructed. There's a second model. The third one is GA and PSO optimization. So GA and optimization means the genetic algorithm. GA means genetic algorithm. So genetic algorithm employs an iterative optimization process that starts with the random population of candidate solution and then modifies the population and calculates the fitness of the candidate solution in each iteration and improves them by using genetic operators of selection. Covers the mutation. On the other hand, the PSO is known as particle swarm optimization. So particle swarm optimization algorithm starts with a population of candidate-wise particles, each of which is initiated with a random velocity and position. The iterative process maintains the self-awareness of the vector position and particle motion speed. Meanwhile, the particle movement are guided by formulas to seek the respective position within the search domain. So that's the models. So now the next step is to do the sensitivity analysis. So considering different natural depletion and recovery degrees of shale gas reservoir, the first, fifth, and the seventh years were simulated as the starting time of CO2 injection. With a constant surface gas rate of 100,000 meter cube per day, and the cumulative shale gas production from the producer set at a constant bottom hole pressure of 25 megapixel is. So if you see this figure number 2, you see this figure number, this first figure number 4 on your right side is a CO2 breakthrough time and CH4 recovery of the cases with different bottom hole pressure and the producer. So if you see this figure number 4, so you will determine that the shale gas recovery factor is significantly influenced by the bottom hole pressure. If you see the bottom hole pressure, when the bottom hole pressure is increasing, okay, so the factor of storage is also increasing. So you can see the breakthrough time is also increasing. So along with the bottom hole pressure from 15 to 25, okay, it is increasing from 15 to 25. The recovery factor dramatically drops from 29.8 to 10.5%. So this green line shows the recovery factor. It is reduced a lot. Okay, and the CO2 breakthrough time gets delayed by 523 days. So breakthrough time increased by 523 days. And the CO2 storage capacity is linearly enlarged from 47.5 to 97.3 million. So what's happening with the increase of bottom hole pressure, the shale gas recovery factor increases, but the CO2 storage volume increases. Okay, shale gas recovery factor decreases, CO2 volume increases, and also the breakthrough time increases. That's this slide figure is showing. If you see figure number figure on the left side, so figure on the left side, it shows you something else. It shows the CO2 injection rate, means how much CO2 you are injecting. So when you are injecting the CO2, you are increasing the rate. So you can see the rate is increasing from 50,000 to 20,000. So when you are increasing from 50,000 to 20,000, so CO2 storage volume increases and the recovery factor of CH4 is decreasing and the CO2 breakthrough time is also decreasing. That's the effect of injection rate and water mole pressure. Now you come towards the next pictures, which shows the hydraulic spacing and the hydraulic fracture permeability. So if you see the hydraulic fracture spacing, okay, if you see the hydraulic fracture spacing, it shows you that with the increase of spacing, you are increasing the space. With the increase of spacing, the shale gas recovery decreases. Or you can say, with the decreasing of the space, if we decrease the space from 150 to 30, if we decrease the space from 150 to 30, what is happening? Your recovery factor is increasing. Okay, and also shows the same trend in CO2 storage and same trend in CO2 breakthrough. But if you come towards the next figure on the right side, it shows that with the increase of hydraulic fracture permeability, or the breakthrough is moved from 3,000, the breakthrough is here, okay, somewhere the green, the red line shows the breakthrough. So the breakthrough is from 2,872 increased to moved up to 272 days. So the difference of 256 days altogether when the storage volume is reduced by 19.8%. That's the figure it shows. And the next figure, okay, these are the analysis. So it shows the breakthrough time. It shows all the breakthroughs or the these all figures shows the recovery factor, or it shows the CO2 storage, or it shows the breakthrough time with different factors, especially injection rate, bottom hole pressure, fracture hydraulic fracture spacing, and hydraulic fracture permeability. Now we come towards the air and prediction performance. In the process of CO2 displacing shale gas, the main parameters that affect the shale gas recovery are cumulative CO2 sequestration are the bottom hole pressure of the producer, fracture spacing, fracture half length, hydraulic conductivity. These are the four, and injection rate. Through single factor sensitivity analysis, the effect of these independent parameters were examined and found in the range of 15 to 25. That's what we check. That pressure we check for 15 to 25, 30 to 50, we check the space, 15 to 225, and 0 to 0.5 to 225 is the permeability, and then 10,000 to 200,000 respectively the flow rate. So we check these parameters in this way. So if you come towards this picture, this one is interesting. Figure number 8. So figure number 8, it shows the ANN model. So what this ANN model shows? It shows the 5 factors: the injection rate, fracture velocity, they then simulated, and there are different hidden layers inside, and then finally you are getting the CH4 factor, recovery factor, and CO2 storage capacity. That's our outlet. In order to create a big database for training the ANN model, 206 simulation cases were constructed using the lateral hypercubic sampling technique based on the injection production parameters and fracture properties, and were then simulated to generate the shale gas recovery factor and CO2 storage capacity values. These data entries were then separated into 70 and 30% to train and test the ANN models. So if you see the next two figures, these two figures. So these two figures shows that the R value of both the training sets and the testing set for predicting shale gas recovery are 0.9999, indicating a very strong correlation. Similarly, the effect of ANN for predicting CO2 storage capacity, as shown in the figure on the right side, is 0.994 and 0.996 for the training and testing purposes. And it shows that, it also shows a very strong relationship between the CO2 storage and the predicted CO2 storage. This is using the ANN models. Then we have to see the multi-parameter synchronous optimization. So if you see in this table, so what is happening? It is ANN and composition simulation results using the parameter sets optimized by GL and PSO algorithm. So you can see the time in the time consumed is very less. It compares the simulation results and computation time of the compositional simulator with those of ANN surrogate model using the same sets of parameters optimized by GS and PSO. So the maximum shale gas recovery factor obtained by the combined PSO and ANN is 37.33%. That's the recovery factor. And that of combined GA and ANN is 37.27, both of which are higher than 29.82 and 36.89, which are obtained during the sensitivity analysis. So meanwhile, the ANN models consumes only about 1/16500 of the composition simulation time for one case, confirming the high efficiency of the ANN surrogate model. So you can see that the small difference of that between the values, but the values which are obtained using GA and ANN and PSO and ANN are higher compared to sensitivity analysis, but they are taking less time to produce results. So if we do the selective absorption further reveals the distribution of CO2 and CH4 in the shale. A compositional simulation was run using the optimized parameter. The selective absorption of CO2 and CH4 in the shale in the near Valbo region at the 7th of totally 14th stage of hydrofracture of the producer. When CO2 breakthrough in the producer reached 10% was calculated. So you can see here it is calculated at the 10%. The absorption selectivity of CO2 over CH4 ranges from 1.36 to 1.37, 1.69. So you can see from this one, these figures. And the absorption of CO2 by shale is constantly greater than that of CH4. This agrees with the molecular dynamics based expression by the selective absorption of CO2 and CH4 in shale. Now we come towards the conclusion. In CO2-ESGR, a higher CO2 injectivity rate generally leads to lower recovery factor and shorter CO2 breakthrough time. Nonetheless, the CO2 storage capacity increases with increasing injection rate due to elevating pressurization. Ultimate recovery and project duration are the prior consideration for selecting a proper injection rate. ANN is proven to be an accurate, fast, and robust model for surrogating a compositional simulator to predict the shale gas recovery and CO2 storage capacity. The correlation coefficient of which can reach 0.9, showing a very strong relationship. The ANN surrogate model is combination with the GO PSO algorithm significantly improves the multi-parameter synchronous optimization of CO2-ESGR by achieving the highest recovery factor among single factor sensitivity analysis and later hypercube sampling, which has been verified by the compositional simulator. And finally, PSO performs slightly better than GA when integrated with the ANN surrogate model to optimize the hydraulic fracturing design and CO2-ESGR operating parameters. Thank you. Thanks a lot.